It's been quite a few weeks. The last time we learned, I think, was between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I think that was the last time. So it's been a while, for good reasons, though. Yeah, every Monday was a holiday. Rosh Hashanah was Monday. Sukkot was the first beginning of Sukkot was Monday. Simchat Torah, the Shmini Atzeres was Monday. So we're finally getting back into the regular weekday, regular order of things. Thank God. So I'm still getting my voice back from Simchat Torah. But okay, so we are learning the Tanya, the book called the Tanya. We're learning book 2, or part 2 of the Tanya. Tanya has 5 parts. We jumped over the first one. The first one we're going to be starting sometime in December. I know the Hebrew date, but I don't know the English date. That's when we're going to start from the beginning of the Tanya. I wanted to save it for the season when more people are here. So we started from the second part, which is its own section. And actually, I mentioned the first time we started that this part of the Tanya, the author actually wanted to make it first. Then, for whatever reason, he decided it'll be the second part. But it has very much importance and essential to understanding the rest of the Tanya. But this section is more, we mentioned, is more abstract. It's not as practical in the day-to-day. It doesn't speak about practical day-to-day life. It's more talking about God, the unity of God, in Kabbalistic terms and philosophical terms. But obviously, all of these things, as we mentioned throughout the classes, have a effect and implication in our day-to-day life. So this section of the Tanya started off with a verse. The verse goes like this: which means you should know today. Not only know it in your mind, but you have to pay attention to it. You have to bring it to your heart. Ki Hashem hu Elokim. That Hashem is the God. B'shamayim imal, in the heavens above, u'ba'aretz mitachas, and the earth below. Ein ayin. There is nothing else besides for God. So, and we explain what's the simple meaning of this verse. It's very much what we know about Judaism, that there's only one God. The heavens above, the earth below, Ein Od, there's no other, there's only one God. That's what you should know. But the author of the Tanya said, no, this can't be what the verse is really saying. Because to say you should know this, and you need to take it to your heart that there's no God under the earth or things like that, it's not something that you need to keep on, think about it. Bring it to your heart. It's something that's very simply understood. It's not something you need to really hammer in. So the verse must be telling us something else. When it says that Havaya Hashem hu Elokim, or when it says that there's Ein Od, that there's no other, it must be something else. And this was the this led us to the big discovery. Then we talk about God's unity. We say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that there's only one God. It says Hashem Echad, there's one God. What it really means is that God is one. Obviously, there's one God. But besides that, it means something even more than that. It means that God is one. That there's nothing else that exists.
You want me to tie it on?
Tie it.
There's nothing else that exists besides for God. And that was something that seemingly is very hard to grasp. Nothing exists besides for God. What about me? What about everything I'm looking at? What about this computer, this laptop that I see in front of me? How can you say that there's nothing else besides for God? Nothing else exists. And that's what we discussed the past 7 chapters, the past 7 classes, talking about what does it mean that only God exists? Or in other words, that we do not exist. Which sounds pretty wild, pretty radical. And what we explained is that yes, the world, it says in the Chumash, it says, we just read last week's Parsha. In the beginning, how does the Torah start off? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you say the heavens and earth don't exist, then what did God create? The Torah says that God created something. What do we mean that it doesn't exist? We mean it has the world ourselves have no independent existence. We don't exist on our own. We're never something separate from God. Without God's energy creating us every second, we would cease to exist. Yeah, like the line we said is like, imagine God is holding the world in his hands, and if his energy would stop giving energy to the world, then we would fall into the abyss. If God would, so to speak, let his hands go of holding the world in place, the world would cease to exist, because the world has no real self-existence. It only exists because God is creating it every second. That's what we discussed in the past 7 chapters. I'm trying to give it in very short. Obviously, we explained everything in a lot more detail on different levels of unity, etc. But it boils down to this: that we said there's only God exists. How could that be? There are things outside of God. There's a world. There's me. There's you. There's all the galaxies. What does it mean that only God exists? Because nothing else has its own existence. Everything is really part of God's existence. But the truth is, that's only step 1 to this whole discussion. That's all talking about things that are outside of God. They don't really exist in the true meaning of existence. They have no independent existence. So only God truly exists. Everything is just feeding off God's existence. Everything is really just an extension, a translation of God's energy. From chapter 8 through chapter 12, which the last chapter of this section is chapter 12. So we're getting towards the end. From chapter 8 through chapter 12, it's going to discuss what about within God? What about unity within God? Now, I'm going to explain what that question is and obviously the answer. But again, till now we spoke about everything that's outside of God doesn't really exist. But things that are within God, maybe they do exist. What am I referring to? So there's something in Kabbalah, in Kabbalistic teachings, one of the most basic ideas in Kabbalah is that there are 10 divine attributes. God has 10 divine attributes with which he creates the world. You can kind of connect that with, we know there's 10, God has 10 sayings. Like we said in the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. He said, let there be light. Let there be this. Let there be that. There are 10 of those sayings. They're called the 10 utterances. And each one of these utterances came from a different attribute of the divine, of Hashem's attributes. Now, I'm going to go through them with you now. First of all, because it's connected to what we're speaking about, but also it's a very, very basic thing we're going to need to lay out whenever we talk about Kabbalah or anything that we're going to discuss in the Tanya classes. In chapter 3, in the first part of Tanya, it goes through these 10 attributes in a little more detail. So some of the things I won't discuss in this class, and I'll save it for then. But one thing for sure that you can read, I'm sure you can find online a lot to research about these 10 divine attributes. I'm going to give you a very short version and some of them. So the 10 divine attributes are, the first one is called Chachma. In Hebrew, the word Chachma, which in English means wisdom. Like a Chacham is a smart person. Chachma is wisdom. The second one is called Bina. Second one in Hebrew is called Bina, which means understanding in English. First one's wisdom. Second one is understanding. The third one is called Das. It's called knowledge. That's the third of the divine attributes. Now you can see all these are similar, that they're all they're all intellectual attributes. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge are all part of your intellect. And I'm going to explain a little bit why these are 3 separate things. Following that comes chesed, kindness, gevura, strictness, rules, control. Gevura literally means strength. That's the next. That's the 5th divine attribute. The 6th one is called tiferes, which It has different meanings: splendor, beauty. Those are the first three of the emotional attributes. The first three were more intellectual attributes: wisdom, understanding, knowledge. The next three are emotional: kindness. The next one was strictness, control, might. The third one was beauty. Now I'm going to explain mainly these first six. The other four we touched upon one of them, Malchus. The last one is called Malchus, kingship. We spoke about that in one of the previous classes. The other three we'll get to another time. What exactly are these steps, these divine attributes? Every one of these attributes leads into the next. The first one we said was chachma, wisdom. What is that referring to? So, like this. We exist, we are a person. We are a person, we have our experience, our life experience. Now, in order to have something that's outside of you come into your existence, your experience, you need this capacity called wisdom, called chachma. Think about it. Let's speak a little more general for a second. What's the whole idea of being intellectual? Humans have this unique capacity to have intellect. What is that? It's that we can absorb, we can take in to our experience something outside of us. An animal is all about its own existence. How do I get what I need? Even the brain of an animal is all about just survival, getting what it needs. What's unique about a human being is that we have this capacity of wisdom, which is that we can absorb into our experience things from outside, things that are outside of us. Let's say, for example, you're stuck. You need to figure something out. We need to create a world-saving technology. We don't know how to, let's say, climate change. I don't know. How are we going to do it? So you have to, our brain starts thinking, and then all of a sudden we come up with an idea. Based on what I know, maybe we could do this and that. That moment in time where you come from not knowing something to actually, something entering your brain, that flashpoint, that is called chachma, that is called wisdom. That's where everything starts. Chachma is the most creative of all the attributes. It's the start, it's to get the ball rolling. It's the start of the whole process. Again, chachma is that change from not knowing, having no relation, having not relating to this outside concept, and now there's that second where it enters your experience, it enters your mind. Now it's important to know it's like you don't have the whole idea spelled out clearly, how this is going to work, why this is going to work. You can't explain it to anyone. It's just that flash. We all can relate to this. You're trying to understand something, you get it. It flashes to you for a second. This makes sense. I get it. But you can't explain it yet. You have to break it down. You have to spell it out. You have to, let's say a math problem, maybe you can have an idea how to solve a math problem, but then you have to actually go through the method and actually show how this, actually answers the math problem. For example, I know with Einstein, I don't know a lot about science, but Einstein, he came up with a theory, but he had to be able to spell it out in math. And it took him a long time to get to that second point. So you have first that flash, the idea, it should make sense. I think I get it. This idea kind of came into our experience. The truth of the idea came into our experience. But now, step 2 is bina, is understanding. Step 2 is breaking it down, comprehending it in a human, intellectual way, methodical. That is bina. So again, chachma, it's just the general idea. It's just the idea itself. Bina, step 2, is where now it's broken down into details. It's spelled out. It's properly, methodically understood. That's step 2. So we have chachma, wisdom. Bina is understanding. Step 3 is called das, is knowledge. What exactly is that? Seemingly, I got the idea, and then I broke it down, I figured it all out, I understand it. What else is there? What's the next step? So this is something very interesting. It's a little hard to define, but something very practical. And I'll give you an illustration to prove it. You can understand something, you can learn about something, but it's very possible to not apply it to yourself. I don't know, let's say, for example, we can know about healthy foods, what's healthy, what's not healthy, right? But I understand it, I can explain it to you exactly why it's not healthy, but sometimes we're missing that link to tell us, oh, this is actually relevant to your life. It's that knowledge, that recognition that this is actually part of my reality. It's not just a concept out there. This is part of my life. This is part of my reality. That's das. That's the third step, to be able to bring it and to know it in a real way. The extreme example of this, it says in the Torah, we had in last week's parsha, it said, "V'ha'adam yada estava." Adam knew his wife. That's the words it uses. He knew his wife. Now, what does it mean that he knew his wife? You look in the context, it's saying that he was intimate with his wife. And it says they had a child, the third child, Seth, Shase. That's what the verse says. But what's this terminology? He knew his wife. It's the same word, das, yada, das, knowledge. The idea is that you can have a concept, then there's knowing it. It's being intimate with it, so to speak. It being real to you. Not just that Adam had a wife, Chava, he knew her, he was close with her. He was intimate with her. And that's the same thing. Every time we understand something, there's always this final step of the understanding where we think about it in real terms, that it's actually real. It's part of our reality. If not, it cannot have any effect on you. Like I said, when it comes to healthy food or good and bad habits, we can know something's a bad habit, but it has to be, you have to get it, you have to actually understand it's part of our reality. It's another step. And that takes focusing on and thinking about how it's actually part of our reality. That's step 3, called das, knowledge. These are all intellectual attributes. Next comes kindness. And the second one after kindness was, these are all emotional attributes, was severity, strength, power, strictness, control. These are things which are guided by what we comprehended, what we understood, how we related to it through das, through that third step. That will translate itself into love and fear, which are behind kindness and severity, kindness and strictness. Based on how we related to something, that will tell us to love it or to push it away. So to be strict, be controlling, put ourselves at a distance. Just to how it would play out. Kindness would say, oh, you know what you should do? Be kind to anyone and everyone. You should give your money away to everyone and anyone, even if they deserve, they don't deserve, don't care. Be kind. That's the next attribute, kindness. The one after that is strictness, control. Don't just give to everyone, only give to who deserves. Only give to or for example, you can't, a parent can't let a child do whatever the child wants. You can't only be kind to your child, you need to show strictness, you need to show control, or else the child will run into the street, God forbid, or take a knife or whatever, God forbid. So you need this attribute. You can't only be kind and only be giving, you need this attribute of control to steer everything. Then there's this third thing we said called tiferes, which means beauty, harmony. When is something beautiful? You have just one color, it could be nice, but it's not beautiful. Something is beautiful when it includes and incorporates different aspects and blends it together. That's beauty. That's splendor. That's tiferes. What does that mean in this context? Tiferes, in other words, is called mercy. That's one of the words is used for tiferes. Divine mercy is tiferes. Where does mercy fit into this picture? You can have kindness, saying to give to anyone and everyone. You have severity, strictness, saying don't give everyone. You have to only give who deserves. Mercy says, I know it doesn't deserve. I'm going to have mercy. I'm going to still give. Now, what's the difference between mercy and kindness? Kindness doesn't acknowledge who it's giving to. It gives to everyone. You deserve, you don't deserve. Kindness would do a favor for a rich person, like a poor person, needs it, doesn't need it. Kindness just gives and gives and gives. Mercy acknowledges the recipient, acknowledges who the recipient is, and says, oh, brother, I know you don't deserve it, but I'm still going to give. So you see how it combines both. It combines kindness, it's still giving, but it includes strictness, control, because it knows that it doesn't deserve. It acknowledges that fact. So it brings the two together and comes up with something beautiful. I'm going to give, even though he doesn't deserve. But with those words saying, I know you don't deserve, but I'm still going to give. That's what mercy is. These are the first 6 of the divine attributes that God used to create the world. The other ones are called Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus, victory. Hod is like splendor, thanks. Yesod is foundation, and Malchus is kingship. We're not going to go into the rest of those. Those are all how to execute. Now that you understood about the other person, or the thing that's outside of you. Now you had an emotional reaction, how to relate to it. And then it was about executing what your emotion is telling you, based on your emotion, which is based on your intellect, to do. And that's the next 4. They're more about how to execute the action that you're trying to get done. But you can see how it's all a process. First, you absorb something that's outside of you. You understand it properly. It becomes real to you, and therefore you have an emotional reaction, whether it's kindness, strictness, or mercy. And then you execute what you want to do based on that, what the conclusion is. And these are God's God. So I was explaining it more in a human terms, but God, why do we have these 10 attributes? Is because God has these 10 attributes, and that's through these 10 attributes. That's how God created the world. In Kabbalah, these are called the 10 sephiros. Which the word sephiros has 3 meanings: counting, shining, and writing, and that has its own long topic. But it's 10 divine attributes that God uses, tools that God uses to create the world. Okay, that is a very basic Kabbalah concept, which will come up many, many times. The different attributes of the divine of God. Now, why am I talking about this? Because based on what we're saying, that God has 10 separate attributes, how can you say that God is one? If God has 10 separate attributes, then he's not one God, he's made up of 10 different parts. We said God is one. God is simple. That's the question that we need to tackle here. And that's what these chapters 8 through 12 are tackling, this issue. How can God be one simplistic existence if he has 10 separate attributes? That's the question. That is what the author will try to answer throughout these next chapters. Just to illustrate a little bit of what this means, that something is, it looks like one, but it really has different parts to it. Let's give an example of milk. Yeah, you can have fresh milk. It's milk. Don't complicate it. It's milk. What is it? It's fresh milk. It looks like one thing. Really, if you break it down, what does milk have? It's carbohydrates, there's protein, there's fat, there's minerals, and all these things together make up the liquid milk. So it's not really one simple drink milk. It really has different parts to it. And so too, seemingly, we're saying that about God, that God isn't really one. He has different parts to him. I need to get I left my book on that table. I'm going to come back in 1 second to get it. So the first person to really tackle this issue, this discussion, is in a clear way, is Maimonides, the Rambam. He lived in the the 12th century, 1100s. He's the first one to really tackle this issue. Now, I'm going to read to you some quotes of his, and that will and see how he first of all illustrates the issue, and then how he deals with it. Now, one thing I need to clarify before anything, that Maimonides was not known to be a Kabbalist. He was like his times were right before the Kabbalists became more prominent. Maimonides was a philosopher. Now, why is this important to know? What's the difference between a Kabbalist and a philosopher? They could both be talking about very lofty, abstract things. But a philosopher, he starts with human intellect, human understanding, and that's where it starts, but also that's where it finishes. He's philosophizing based on a human intellect and his understanding. And if it fits, it fits. If not, not. That's the way a philosopher approaches things. On the other hand, a Kabbalist, it's something important to know. The word Kabbalah, we've all heard the word Kabbalah. What does it mean? To learn. Okay, now that could be one of the meanings. Another meaning of the word Kabbalah, kibel means to receive. I mentioned this. Yeah, very good. Kabbalah means to receive. What is that? In other words, it means tradition. It means something that was passed down. That's what Kabbalah really is. How do we have Kabbalah today if most Jews didn't learn it throughout all the centuries and the millennium? It's because it was passed down from person to person, these divine secrets, the way the world, what goes on behind the world, etc. It was passed down. That's what the word Kabbalah means. It means tradition. It means receiving. Now, this is very important in this discussion because the Rambam, let's say, there's a discussion if he knew Kabbalah, knew about Kabbalah. We're not going to get into that. Let's just assume that he didn't know about it. You definitely don't see him writing about it too much. So he never had any pre-knowledge or like tradition about any facts. He was coming pure from a philosophical perspective. What's true according to human intellect and what's not true. What makes sense, what doesn't make sense. But a Kabbalist doesn't work like that. A Kabbalist received a tradition about what is true and what is not true. To him, it's fact. I received a fact as part of the tradition that, let's say, for example, not that this is true, but let's say it's part of the tradition that black is really white. You see it as black, but it's really white. So a Kabbalist would have to say, oh, it's part of the tradition that I received. It's part of this teachings that went on from generation to generation, that black is really white. So he wouldn't just say, so a philosopher would say, oh, that's nonsense, throw it away. Doesn't make sense. A Kabbalist would have to work with that and say, it says black is really white. How can that be? And I'll start having to look into, what is white really? What is right really? What is black really? And somehow reconcile to show how black is really white. That's what a Kabbalist would have to do. Again, because he received a hard fact, 100% fact about something, he has to work with that. And you will see that in this discussion, we'll see Maimonides, he's going to say divine attributes, maybe they're not real. Maybe they don't make sense. But a Kabbalist can never say such a thing. Kabbalist received as part of his tradition that there are these 10 divine attributes. So he has to work with them and see what he can come up with. So that's a big, big difference to realize before we even start between Maimonides' approach and a Kabbalist's approach. And you'll see it very clearly. So Maimonides writes, he has a section called the 13 Principles of Faith. Something very interesting of the Jewish faith, 13 Principles of the Jewish faith, something very good to read, good to know. We actually have a class later in the year. You'll have the Palm Beach Synagogue calendar, you can see it there, scheduled about these 13 Principles of Faith. We're not going to jump into all of them. We're going to talk about the second one. The second one of the Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith is God's unity. And I'm reading a direct translation, namely, that we are to believe that He, who is the cause of everything, is one, that Hashem is one. He is not like the one of a peer. Yeah, let's say you have a husband and wife. So you say they're one, but they're not really one, they're two. So God is not like that. That's not his oneness, the oneness of a peer. And he's not the one of a species, or like the one who is comprised of many parts. Yeah, let's say a human being. It's one body, it's one person, but there's different parts to it. There's his brain, there's his heart, there's his hands, there's his feet. There's different parts to that person. God is not like that. And he is not like a plain item, which is one in number, but can be divided and subdivided endlessly. Yeah, if you do it in a mathematical way, you could have one, but even one can be divided again and again and again. So that's not God's oneness. Rather, he is one with a unity that has no parallel whatsoever. There's nothing we can compare God's unity to in our world, in our experience. This is the second principle of faith, taught by the verse, Hear, O Israel, Shema Yisrael, God is our God, God is one. What does it mean God is one? That he has no parts to him. He's one simple being. Okay, that's the second principle of faith. But if so, we have that question. How can you say that God has 10 separate attributes if he's one simple being? That's the question we asked before. So Maimonides acknowledges this question. And what does he say? Attributes don't really exist. Yeah, they're just allegories. Yeah, if you want to believe that God is one, there's only one God, they're allegories. Now I'm going to quote to you again. He writes like this: You must know that he may be exalted, meaning Hashem, God, has no way and in no mode any essential attribute. Just as it is impossible that he should have a body. It's impossible to say that God has a body, obviously. So just like you can't say that God has a body, it's impossible to say that he should possess an essential attribute, to have any attributes at all. If, however, someone does believe that he is one, but he also possesses a certain number of essential attributes, he says in his words that he is one, meaning he's saying that he believes God is one, but he believes in his heart that actually God is many. The Maimonides writes this, that this resembles what Christians say, namely that he is one, but also three, and that the three are one. So, in other words, he's saying if you're going to believe that there's 10 divine attributes, you're basically believing in Christianity. And as a Jew, a Jew can't believe in Christianity. So, in other words, he says it's very extreme to even attribute to God 10 separate attributes. And he goes on to say, he who affirms that God may be exalted has a positive attribute, meaning even something good. You want to say God is wise. If you're going to say God has wisdom, has abolished his belief in the existence of God without even being aware of it. Now, this is very extreme, but it's very simple. You're going to say God is one, then you have to say God is one till the end. There's no details to God at all. God is simple. Then what about all the facts that we see? If you look throughout the Bible, you'll see so many times it describes God as merciful, God is gracious, God is wise. You'll find so many terms and adjectives attributed to God. What about all these things? How come Maimonides how could the Rambam just totally contradict that? So he says like this: when you encounter a word of the sages which seems to conflict with reason, meaning with logic, you will pause and consider it and realize that this utterance must be a riddle or a parable. Sleep on it, try anxiously to grasp its logic and its expression so you may find its genuine intellectual intention. And why would they use these allegories? So it's the method of truly great thinkers. Since the words of sages all deal with supernatural matters, which are ultimate, they must be expressed in riddles and analogies because you can't talk about it directly. And that's why it sounds as if God has attributes, but they're really allegories trying to say something, but not that God actually has such attributes. Okay, that's Maimonides' opinion. But the issue is that Maimonides does say that God must be living, possessing power, possessing knowledge, and possessing will. That's what it says. God must have these things. But 1 second, you just told me that God doesn't have attributes. Okay, and he deals with each one. But the one that's the hardest to understand is knowledge. How can Maimonides say that God has knowledge? What's the complication of knowledge? It's something very interesting. what we mentioned before, what is knowledge? What is intellect? It's taking something that's outside of you and adding it to your existence, appreciating, understanding something that's outside of you. That's what knowledge is. So if you're saying God has knowledge, what are you saying? That God, first of all, what does it mean, God's knowledge? Let's say I did something good today. God knows about it. I did something not good today. God knows about it. God knows what's happening in the world. If you say that, then you're saying that God changes. Meaning, just like by us. If I learn about something before I didn't know about it, now I know about it. Before that wasn't part of my experience, my life experience, now it is part of my life experience. It's something added, something was changed here. But to say that God has knowledge, you're saying that God gains knowledge. Something is added onto his existence based on what I do. Or even more extreme, before there was a world, God didn't know about it, world, it didn't exist. Now he created the world, now he knows about it. And he knows what happens in it. Every day something new happens. So seemingly God is changing based on if you say God has knowledge. So for Maimonides, he says something, this is the main thing we need to know. It's something we're going to discuss throughout the chapter. So we don't have to understand it, you just need to know this is what he says. He says that whenever you have a person knowing something, there's three different things happening here, or three different aspects here. There's the person that's getting to know this concept. Then there is the known, what is being known. Yeah, for example, let's say I know the Yankees lost the playoffs yesterday. So what am I knowing? I'm knowing the Yankees. I'm knowing the lost game. So that's another thing. And the third aspect is my power, my ability to know things. There's me, there's my ability to know things that are outside of me, and then there's the actual thing that's being known that's outside. You always have, in the human experience, you always have these three separate aspects when you're coming to know something. So he says, when it comes to God, when it comes to Hashem, all these three are really all one. They're all one existence. Meaning, in other words, he says like this: God, he is the power to know, as well as the knower and the known. Those three notions form in him, may be exalted. One single notion where there is no multiplicity. Meaning, the way we always experience things, there's me, there's my knowledge, and when I'm knowing, there's the known. For God, it's all one. When God knows something, he doesn't know it because it's outside of him and something's being added onto his experience. God knows himself. Because he knows himself, he knows everything. Which we're going to explain what this means throughout, we're going to try to explain this throughout the chapters. But the truth is, Maimonides writes that the mouth has no power to express this idea, nor the ear to hear it, nor the heart of man to recognize it properly. It's impossible to really appreciate what that means, because we don't, and that's what we're going to talk about in this chapter, that's not how we experience life. The way we experience life is, there's me, there's my knowledge, and what I'm knowing. It's three separate things. But by God, everything is within him. So when he knows himself, he knows everything. So it's not something that's being added to his knowledge or being added to his being, his existence. It's all within him the whole time. Again, it's something very hard to relate to. It's very hard to fathom. But the point is that, you can ask on Maimonides, how does God have knowledge? Answer is because it's not real. It's not the knowledge that we know. It's not the typical knowledge that we relate to. Rather, it's a different type of knowledge. It's a divine knowledge. He knows himself. By knowing himself, he knows everything. Because everything comes from him, etc. So, in short, what do we have here? Maimonides is saying is that God is simple. God is not made up of parts. Anytime you'll see some sort of attribute to God, it's really just an allegory. It's not real. God is really just this simple being. And we gave an example like his knowledge. It's all really part of his being. It's all one. It's not something outside of him. Okay, that's Maimonides. He's a philosopher. He could say, 10 attributes, 10 divine attributes, they're not real. But what about the Kabbalists? They can't say that. The Kabbalists have to, they have part of the tradition. They received, it was Kabbalah, it was received that there are 10 divine attributes. So what are they going to say? So there's the one man known as Israel of, I don't know how to pronounce this, it's a city in Spain. Girona.
Herona, I think.
Herona?
Gerona.
Yeah, exactly. Herona. So he lived between 1160 and 1238. Now, this city, I was looking up online for a second. It's people know this city. It's a little famous because that's where they filmed the TV series, the Game of Thrones. So it used to be filmed there. I think what I read online is up until 2015, they filmed it in this city. It has a very old part of the city that's in good condition, so to speak, and they use that. It's also known for its Jewish quarter. Till today, it's one of the most well-preserved Jewish quarters in Europe. So that's another thing about this city, Herona. So Rabbi Israel, who was a Kabbalist, he lived in Herona. He lived the same time as Maimonides, but he was younger than him. So he lived a little later than him also. And he commented on what Maimonides said, because if you think about it, anything really, whoever is the first one to talk about it, that becomes like the standard, the gold standard. Everyone has to compare themselves to that. Do they accept this gold standard? Do they reject it? But everything is kind of based on this gold standard. So Maimonides, since he was the first one, he was like the standard, and everyone had to comment and say their opinion on what they agree, disagree, do they nuanced of what Maimonides says. So he says, Rabbi Israel, he says that no, there's no such thing. He doesn't like what Maimonides says. I'll quote you what he writes. The way he wrote his book is in a way of question answer. Now, I don't think there was an actual person asking the question, but he wrote the book as if this person is asking all these questions and he's answering. So the sixth question is like this: how can we possibly say that he is one and the multiplicity of 10 attributes at the same time within him? How is he one but also have 10? Is he 1 or 10? So he writes like this. This is the answer. I've already informed you that the one is the foundation of many spheres, and no new power is introduced in them other than from him. He is more than them. Each one of the attributes is superior to the one next one below. The power of one is in the other. In other words, what he's saying is everything comes from Hashem. Everything comes from God, and they're all just one leads to the next from this ultimate source, from Hashem. I'll continue reading. Therefore, the first is the power of them all. Conversely, the power of them all is nothing more than the first power. While the first is the power of them all, there is nothing in particular in the detailed powers, attributes that is not found in the first general power. He gives a metaphor. You have a fire. Okay, you have a fire. Now, a fire has the flame, sparks, it has the hues, the colors of the fire. But it's one fire, and all these different things come from the one fire. They're all one essence, even though they differ from each other and are divided into separate components. They all still come from one. So, in other words, he's saying that God is one, God is simple, and these are attributes that come from him, but he himself is simple. No, but so in other words, he's saying that that these 10 attributes do exist, but they're not really 10 attributes. They really come from one source, like a fire. It's one fire. You're just seeing it from different angles. You'll see the sparks, you'll see the colors, you'll see, but it's really all one thing. That's the way he says it. So what comes out from what he's saying is that yes, God has 10 attributes, but you could look at them as all one. That's how Rabbi Israel explains it. The next one, his name is Asher ben David, also lived at the same time, but he had a different approach. He accepted Maimonides' approach that the attributes aren't real, but he didn't accept it. And we'll see soon. But in other words, he's very similar to Maimonides. Again, the main component of Maimonides is saying that the attributes don't exist. God is simple, and any type of attribute, God is merciful, God is this, God is that, is not true. It doesn't actually exist. It's just an allegory. The next person we said is the opposite. He was saying that all the attributes are real, just how you look at it, whatever. The third one is going to be like Maimonides, but not like Maimonides, because he's a Kabbalist. He has to accept that these attributes are true, are real. So not to waste any more time, as we're getting close to the end. He says that heaven forbid to say that God has different attributes, is limited to, like you say, God has wisdom, has knowledge, has kindness. These are limiting things. Kindness is limited, wisdom is limited. It's a specific definition. You can't say that God is limited to anything specific. But on the other hand, he says that these 10 attributes are real, but only from our perspective. From God's perspective, there are no such thing as 10 attributes. Now, we discussed in previous chapters, how could you have two different perspectives? But in other words, he's saying the truth, the real reality, the way God sees things, there is no 10 separate attributes. God is one, God is simple. But the way we see things, there are 10 actual attributes. That's the way he explains. So he's like Maimonides, that the truth is monotheism has to believe that there's only one simple being, God himself. But from our perspective, from our human perspective, there are 10 real divine attributes, and that's how he created the world. And this third way is how this book, the Tanya, the author of the Tanya, explains about the divine attributes. That there's two different perspectives, but from God's perspective, from God's point of view, everything is really one. Everything is really simple existence, just God's existence. Now, how does that happen? How is that to be? That's something totally beyond our understanding. The Tanya, the author of the Tanya, actually uses Maimonides' allegory of the knowledge, the knower of the knowledge, the actual tool, the power to know, and the actual known, the thing that's being known. The author of the Tanya writes this, and he says the same is true for all the divine attributes, that they're all within God and they're all one. Now, how are they all one? How can you have knowledge of things that are seemingly outside of him, but still be one with Hashem? That's something we can't understand. It's beyond our experience. And that's what he does within these next chapters. He basically, what he does is, he explains in this chapter 8, he explains how the human experience works. And in chapter 9, he's going to say, godliness, divine, doesn't work like that. It's beyond that. It's different than that. And that's why we can never try to expect to understand God himself. In very short, what he says is, we can only understand things the way we experience life. Yeah, I'll give you an example. It's very hard to get out of your own head, right? To see things from a different way. I was a teacher. I still teach Talmud here in the synagogue. I used to teach high school boys Talmud, Gemara. Yeah, it's law, but a lot of the cases are theoretical. It talks about if a cow I'll give you an example. A cow was pregnant and they gave birth. Now, but sometime between it before giving birth and after giving birth, the cow was sold to someone else. So now you need to know the discussion is who gets this calf, because you don't know who was in possession of the cow when it gave birth. Was it the previous owner or the second guy? Because you weren't in the farm, you were busy in the marketplace making business deals. So what do you do in that case? So it's a theoretical case. You're not sure. You're not sure who it goes to. So what do? And you divide it. You give it to the previous owner because we assume that it belongs to him until proven otherwise. These are theoretical cases. But as a student, talk to me about cows. And it happened to give birth at that minute or that hour that you weren't there and you didn't see. It's to them, it's so absurd, and it's hard to show them. No, we're just giving an example. But the idea, we're really talking about a concept here. When you're in doubt, what do? We're talking about a theoretical concept. We're using an example, but it's sometimes very hard to separate the example from the concept. And that's really our experience in general. We can only relate to things, only understand things based on the way we have it, the way we experience it. And it's impossible to go out of our experience. Maybe to to illustrate this, I read this somewhere. Anyone here a musician? Dancer. Okay. So there's different wavelengths, pitches, loudness, etc. in music. And you could say there's one extreme to the other. It's very vast, the different types of sounds. The truth is that that's only a few thousand different wavelengths of sound. The whole music world is only within a few thousand wavelengths of sound. But the truth is that there are millions and trillions of different wavelengths in the universe. We only experience a few thousand of them. So on the one hand, it could look like, oh, it's so different, so many different wavelengths. But the truth is, if you put it in perspective, it's nothing. It's all just one category of like human sound, There's really so much more that we don't even tap into, we can't even fathom. Same thing. We have the human experience. In this chapter 8, he spells out what the human experience is. We said step 1 is knowledge, is getting something that's outside of you and entering your experience. That's step 1. Step 2 is step 1 is the intellectual absorbing of whatever it is. Then step 2 is the emotional reaction. Step 3 is thinking about it in thoughts. Like your thought, there's you have like a spark. It's not necessarily in words, right? You can have a feeling. It's not necessarily something in words. Then there's the actual having a thought with actual words in your brain. I am angry right now. What am I going to do? You can have. So again, the step 1 is the intellectual absorbing whatever it is. Let's say something happens to you, so it's absorbing it in an intellectual way. Then you have an emotional reaction to it based on what you just absorbed. Then that tells you to think about it in a certain way. Step 3 is the thought process. Step 4 is talking about it, whatever just happened. And step 5 is actually doing something, an action. These are 5 steps in the human experience. Just to make it a little clearer, thought is, the way it's spoken about in Kabbalah and other places, thought is revealing to yourself what's going on within you. You can understand something, you can have an emotional reaction. Thought is when you actually, it's like you're conscious, when you actually get to see what's going on within you and then spell it out. So that's thought, but it's still only within you. Speech is when you can take that and give it to someone else. That's speech. But it's still, speech is always just you revealing, expressing what's going on within you. Action is already something that can be totally separate from you. You can do an action and now it's outside of you. So that's already step 5. So I'm saying it very, very quickly, but those are the 5 steps that he says in chapter 8 are the human experience. And there's a big, he says you can't compare, the action to the beginning, when you get to know something, to chachma, to wisdom, because action is something totally almost disconnected from you. On the other hand, wisdom is something that's very much part of you, and he spells this out at length. But the point he's trying to say is, these are just 5 steps. That's our whole human experience. But for God, wisdom, the first step where everything starts, is really, to him, it's the same as action. It's the same distance from him as action is. And we will talk about this more next chapter, because that's what he does. This chapter he focuses on what the human experience is. In the next chapter he focuses how by God it's different. But the idea we're getting to is why we can't understand God. We can't fathom what God's oneness is really like, because his main point is we can only understand things that are within our experience, within our existence, and we're stuck within that experience. We can never get out of that, and therefore we should never try to expect to understand everything about God, because God is, for God, the human experience for God is like the furthest thing from him. So we obviously can't expect to understand it. That is what I want to speak about today. Again, we're starting the second half of this book, of this section of the Tanya. First half is talking about how God is one, is the only existence. There's nothing outside of him. the world doesn't exist on its own, has no independent existence, which we spoke about many chapters. Now we're talking about how within God, even though God has 10 attributes, God is still one, because everything is within him. And the end of the day, we have to say, and Maimonides writes this, that it's something that we can't, the mouth can't say it, the ears can't hear it, the mind can't understand it. It's something that's beyond us. But the main point is that the God having attributes doesn't contradict his oneness, his simplistic oneness. And that's what we're going to spell this out. So ultimately it's something that's beyond our understanding, but we're going to try to understand as much as possible throughout the next chapters. That's what the author of the Tanya tries to do. And obviously, the lesson, the way we could learn from this is, first of all, the humility we have to have, first of all, before other people. People know a lot more than we do, especially before God, before Hashem, where Hashem is totally beyond us. We can't. We have to be. We should be humble in his. We shouldn't expect to understand everything. And that's something that we could kind of picture ourselves. We're so small, or we're so insignificant in a certain way to God. On the other hand, we're so significant because God has a mission for us, and he chose us to do it. So in that way, we are significant, but on our own, we have no significance. It's only because God gives us significance that we're actually significant. But to have that humility and realize that what I'm here for is only my only significance I have is what the significance that God gives me, and therefore I should go work on that. And that's what my mission is, etc. That I think would be the lesson. But this class is again laying out the Kabbalistic 10 attributes. There's these 10 attributes, divine attributes. We also have them, but it starts from God. There's 10 divine attributes. We explain what they are: wisdom, understanding, knowledge. First, just getting that flash of the idea, then understanding it, breaking it down, and then knowledge, making it real. And then we said there's the emotional ones. There's 7 emotional ones, but I start off with the first 3: kindness, which wants to give to anyone, doesn't acknowledge really the recipients. Then there's severity, strictness, and then there is not giving, and then there's mercy, which is to give even though you know that he doesn't deserve. And then there's the rest of them after that, and that is what the chapter 8 is about. Again, saying that we can only stick within our experience, but God is really his oneness is something that's beyond comprehension. How you can have the attributes, but there really be one at the same time. With that, we will finish.